In this episode of The Heart of Teaching Music, Paula Crider.
And the door opened, and there stood a man in a bow tie with a crisp white shirt and a trumpet in his hand. And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you made it. Here, blow in the small end." And that was my first trumpet lesson. If somebody says, "Oh, sweetheart, girls can't do that," your response should be, "Eat my dust."
Hi, I'm Julia Baumanis.
And I'm Scott Edgar. Welcome to the Heart of Teaching Music.
Because without people, there is no music. This space is dedicated to the stories behind the sound.
Stories of identity, belonging, and the courage to make a difference through music.
Join us as we welcome leaders in music and music education who share their journeys, their challenges,
and what it truly means to teach, connect, and lead in our profession. Together, we'll explore why music matters and discover the true power of music for all.
Hey, everybody. This is Julia Baumanis here with my great friend and co-host Scott Edgar. And we are here with our second episode of The Heart of Teaching Music. This episode is sponsored by GIA Publications. And we are very excited to bring to you just somebody that if you don't know who this person is, you are in for a real treat. She's been teaching for almost 33 years. She is a guest conductor internationally. She holds the unique title of being the first female band director in the state of Texas at a 5A high school, and so many other things. But I do want to bring attention to a couple things that she is also the author of Beyond the Notes, which is a really, really amazing book that you all should get, and that I find this really beautiful. She considers her greatest honor to be the privilege of working with all who share a passion for excellence in music making, which is why we're here for this podcast. I want to introduce you to an awesome person. This is Dr. Paula Crider, everybody. Hi, Paula.
Hey, it's so good to be here.
So happy to have you here with us. We start off our podcast with the first question for every single guest that we'll have. And that question is, what is the heart of teaching music to you?
I think the heart of teaching music is, I would have to think about this for about 48 hours to come up with a really profound answer. But the heart of teaching music to me is just having a passion and sharing that passion for what we do. Music touches me in a place that nothing else can. And that's what I want for my students and the people that play on the other side of the baton.
Yeah. How did you get started in music, and where did that feeling first come from?
Well, I grew up in a very small town in Mississippi, and in high school, I was a basketball player, and we had a very good basketball team until our coach quit my junior year to become a principal, as many coaches do. And the new coach was not interested in coaching girls at all. And we had a very good team, but I became rather disenchanted. So one day I just went charging up the steps in the gym just to get away from everything. And the door opened, and there stood a man in a bow tie with a crisp white shirt and a trumpet in his hand. And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you made it. Here, blow in the small end." And that was my first trumpet lesson. He was expecting someone else who never showed up, by the way. But that was my only lesson. I proceeded to probably make the world's worst sound ever known to man on trumpet. But I remembered that moment that my body was alive with possibility. I felt that sound throughout my body. And I thought, oh man, this is what I want to do. So I was a late bloomer. I started halfway through my junior year in high school. And never thought I would follow a career in music, but just love playing the horn and love making music.
You know, that has been something that I have found to be a common thing amongst a lot of us, is that a lot of us never thought we were going to be a musician. It's just the calling that happened, and we luckily answered the call. So it's really interesting that has been your experience as well. My middle school band director would send home a musical aptitude test.
Yep.
He was trying to recruit for the middle school program, and every kid got a really good grade on that musical test, regardless of what they actually did.
Mm-hmm.
And he would send home, "Oh, your child did great in the 90s. Amazing, great promise. Here's how you sign up for band."
Right.
Because he believed that, regardless of what shows up, even if it's the wrong child, you're going to take them and say, blow into the small end, and there you go. That's just brilliant.
Paula, you are just the queen of teaching who's in front of you. Whoever's in front of you, those are the students who you are going to give your lifeblood to. I've seen this with undergrad, college students learning to be conductors for the first time. And I think we've done a really good job over the last 20 years of convincing some people that they're not musicians and getting them out of the profession. Too good of a job. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. And you've done such a beautiful job, Paula, of finding ways to embrace and ways to open doors where other people, I think, have tried to close doors. Can you talk a little bit about that, about some of those doors that you've tried to open up for some of your students?
Well, nothing drives me more. Well, lots of things drive me crazy. But when somebody says to their student, "You're too smart to ever become a band director," I just want to slap them because we all know that what it takes to become a fine teacher and all of the things that we have to know are comparable, I think, to, I tell my music students, if you want to go do something easy, become a neurosurgeon. Then you're only working with one brain at a time, right? But I think it's really important that we let people know, and it's our fault too, I think, because teachers are often treated as second-class citizens.
Yep.
And I think all of the people who are successful, and I underline successful teachers, realize that all the money in the world can't replace 1 second of the time when a kid has an aha moment and you've made their life more special and made them realize that they can do things that they never thought possible. So, a long way of answering your question. I think when we stand in front of a group and ignite that magic, that when they get it, that's what keeps us going. And that's why I'm so lucky to have done this all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we, dig into it a little bit more, one of the things that we want to ask all of our guests on this podcast is, what does music for all mean to you? I think you are a prime example of a person that will meet a student wherever they're at and take them to their full potential. And you'll do it in a way that motivates them and inspires them. I've seen that firsthand. You have done that for me, whether you knew it or not, in a couple of honor bands when I was in high school. But what do you think music for all means to you?
Well, I think it means exactly that. We have to take kids where they are and try to take them to realize that they have great potential. But, not everyone is going to be a great success. But even if they walk into the classroom one day and you say, "Hey, Joey, that's a really cool shirt. Where did you get it?" Joey's going to walk out feeling like he matters. And that's, I think, one of the gifts of teaching music. And then you take it another step and say, doing an honor band and have kids realize that there's more to making music than moving fingers and playing sounds. And I think sometimes that's kind of the missing link, that we get so buried in the technical aspects. And certainly that's very necessary. But to me, music making has to do with emotion. If we don't feel what we're doing, and if I can't make students feel the music, then I don't feel like I'm doing my job. And I think that all great educators or all great musicians are that way. There's something almost mystical, but it's because we believe in what we're doing. And it's like Leonard Bernstein says, if the conductor feels the music, then the orchestra feels the music. If the orchestra feels the music, the audience feels the music. But it's a profound sense of being involved in what we do.
It's this energy that I know there's science behind it, and I know that people have studied that, but it does seem like a magic trick almost, this invisible power that could be transferred from one human to another without ever saying a word.
Indeed.
I think that's beautiful.
Indeed. There's a great quote that says the greatest journey in the world is from the head to the heart and back again.
Paula, what a beautiful quote. And one of the things that we talked about last time, we had a really thoughtful conversation that music doesn't have to be hard to be good. And I think that's a huge challenge that we're facing in our wind band world especially. It's like, well, if our fingers aren't smoking from what they're doing up and down the clarinet, what is the value? And sometimes that's a hard sell. So thank you for that quote. Such a gift.
Right. And kids, of course, kids love technique and they love technical challenges. And that's great. But I had a young man that I met in Australia who wanted to come over and observe bands in the United States. And he went to several states, but I arranged it for him to come to several really fine bands in the Texas area. And one of his comments when I saw him was he was blown away by the quality of the bands. But he said, He said in 16 hours of watching rehearsals, not one band played a ballad. And, they might play a warm-up chorale, but that's a different thing. And again, that's our fault because if we can make beautiful music, even slow, melodic music, meaningful for kids, they're going to love it.
What's interesting is I've asked my band, which is a college ensemble, which is harder for you to perform and why? This slower lyrical piece of music or this fast technical. And every single year, regardless of who's in the group, they all say the slower stuff. And I say, exactly my opinion as well. But why is that your opinion? And they say, it's exposed. You have to be careful. The difficulty isn't in the notation, the black and white on the page. It's getting the color out of the black and white that's on the page and tugging at the human emotions that are associated. That's a higher level of thinking and artistry and vulnerability. And I asked them at the end of concert seasons what piece was their favorite. It's kind of to, think about what I should program for years coming. And it's always the lead is between the fastest, largest end piece, but also the ballad. And it's always tied very closely, sometimes the ballad winning out. I think it's a response to our students, whether they know they want it or not, they want to slow down and they want to feel. They want to slow down and they want to feel and they want to connect. And that's kind of been the feedback that I've been getting recently for my ensembles. I wondered if you had experienced something similar in all of the work that you've done.
Well, absolutely. And ergo, the title of my book, beyond the notes, we also need, one of the reasons that I think that it's so difficult with a slower lyric piece of music is that we have more time between the notes to make decisions, and it's more difficult to maintain that intensity. But I think that it's really important, if we're going to make meaningful music, then we have to make music meaningful. And you talked about what happens. Something chemical actually happens. Those goosebump moments. I'm kind of a science nerd. I had a minor in physics. And, serotonin is released when musicians have a feeling of accomplishment. And oxytocin is called the joy chemical. Well, these two things are just flooded through our body when we have those moments of music that you'll never forget. You may forget the title, but the kids will never forget how you made them feel when they play that piece of music. And again, I think there's so much research going on that deals with musical expression, but looking in the wrong way. They're looking at technique of the fingers rather than, the expression of emotion. And getting back to the slower pieces, that gives us, not that we can't, if you're, playing the latest, greatest, loudest, fastest John Mackey piece, that it's not exciting and you can't involve yourself emotionally. But, if you're playing a nice Granger, for example, and you know the story behind the Irish tune, it's unforgettable.
Let's take a quick break.
This episode is sponsored by GIA Publications. GIA is a leading publisher of music education resources. From music play for infants to beginning band and strings methods, college-level texts to music aptitude tests, books from leading voices in music education to top-notch recordings, GIA has something for you. Visit giamusic.com to learn more. giamusic.com.
HOTM friends, we want to hear your voice. Do you have a comment, a general question, or even a question for a specific future guest? Great, because you can be a part of a future episode. Visit musicforall.org/podcasts for a list of future guests. And then all you have to do is click the Ask a Question button. We may include your voice in a future episode. Again, to record your question, just go to musicforall.org/podcasts. Let's rejoin our conversation.
I want to maybe go a little bit of a different way for this next question and get Joanna's question in here. Whether or not we know it to be part of our journey, a lot of times when we're the first to be in the position as we are, that means a lot to the people who are going to follow us. And you, as being one of the first women conductors in many of your positions, has been truly inspiring. Whether you set out for that to be or not, I have a feeling that wasn't part of your plan. You just wanted to make music meaningful to the people in front of you, which I think is noble. but it has inspired a lot of us and a lot of students. And one of Scott's music ed students, Joanna Wen, has this question for you.
What advice would you give a young woman who is just starting off in her music education career?
I'm asked that a lot. And I must say that being a female and still a very male-dominated field is a challenge. But you've heard the old statement about you have to be twice as good if you're a female or a minority to be considered equal. And I view that as a strength because I've always felt that I had to prove myself. And I don't think that's a bad thing because it made me stronger and it made me better. And two people that were very influential in my career were my grandparents. They were the ones that said you can do anything you want to do. And my grandmother was a great fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. And she often told me the quote that no one has the ability to make you feel inferior without your consent. And that's been one of my guiding lights. And so, Joanne, I say to you that, if somebody says, oh, sweetheart, girls can't do that, your response should be eat my dust. Because it's that type of commitment that, and again, when I started teaching, I was too busy teaching to worry about, and that's another thing. You can't concern yourself with other people's opinions. The world is full of naysayers, and some people have nothing better to do than be negative, and I don't even want to associate myself with them. But if you're going into music, my best advice for you is to love music and learn as much as you can, and your students will reward you with experiences that will be life-changing.
Paula, Joanna's going to lose it from that response. Thank you. What a gift to Joanna. I also want to add something to your bio that is not currently there, and that is the 100% greatest footnote of all time in your book that we just referenced beyond the notes. And that is on page 17. You know where I'm going with this. Even as I write in 2023 AD, there are those who still wish to hold on to the primordial belief that a certain anatomical accoutrement is necessary for success in this profession. Thankfully, there are many more enlightened souls today who are ardent supporters of competent women. And for that, I'm here. Here. Thank you, Paula, and thank you for that response for Joanna on her behalf.
It's funny how most people don't read footnotes, but when they read that one, I get a really positive response.
It has made your response, the levity, but also the I don't have time for this attitude in your response to what I call the silliness, which is people taking the time out of their day to tell you what you can and cannot do. My response is always, it's interesting you have a lot of time on your hands to think about what I'm doing with the time on my hands.
Ooh, beautiful.
And it has been inspiring to see the grace and the levity of which you approach these answers, because there's two ways to go about it. I guess three ways. One way to just ignore it, right? Another way to meet stupidity with a lot of, rage and, well-deserved.
Sure.
But then your response, which I think puts them in their place and, surprises them. They're expecting some sort of illicit response from this person. And I love that you don't let them take anything from you and you are just you with your responses. And that has been a masterclass, in my opinion, on how to handle the silliness, which is what I call it.
Well, thanks for your kindness. My mantra is in your face, human race.
I love that.
I hate bullies, and I will not allow myself ever to be bullied. But I think, and you mentioned it earlier, spending time in a rage about something that you can't change is a total waste of time, and life is way too short.
I remember one of my close friends who is a female was talking about, some people were having an attitude about her body image, which is a very terrible thing for anybody to go through, but I think is disproportionately put on women. And, she was talking to me about my job and what we all do, which is, oftentimes on a podium with our, backside turned to a room full of people, right? And She was talking to me about, I spend a lot of time wondering about my physical appearance and how I'm going to be perceived. And I said bluntly to her, because I've known her for many years, I was like, honestly, you should just turn around and be like, don't like what you see? Look away.
Right.
Just look away. This is me. I'm so sorry. You don't appreciate it. Look away. You could close your eyes.
Sure.
Last time I checked. Something like that. And then getting back to what the role is at that time, which is to address the people that are there for you, the people that have shown up for you and are the people that you choose to surround yourself with. So I always think about how much of a champion you are for the people in your ensembles. I go back to what your greatest honor is in your bio is the privilege of working with all who share a passion for excellence in making music. So you're so student-centered, music-centered. And it's clear from the first moment, that story that you shared about playing the trumpet for the first time. But I guess my question is, how can you flip or encourage new teachers who are inward facing, right? Our music ed programs are often saying, watch your video of your teaching and what would you change, to take that information, but then flip the view to where they're thinking more about student service and how is this going to go for my students and what can I do for them? How to make it more about the student-centered focus as opposed to the conductor-centered focus.
That's a great question. And obviously, I've thought about that a lot over the years. But I tell a story in my book about the first year I was teaching. And first-year teachers, please don't ever get discouraged, because sometimes there is no way in the world, and we have to be honest about this. Nobody ever teaches anyone how to teach. And when you think about that, so we shouldn't even pretend. I think that we learn by doing, we learn by questioning, we learn by exploring. And it is a lifelong process. But, I was so busy, it was like drinking from a fire hose, hearing all of these sounds. And my ears hadn't learned I couldn't even read a full score when I first stepped on the podium. I mean, we start from square one, right? And we'd been rehearsing this one march, getting ready for a concert, and it had just a little dum run in it. And one day, they finally just nailed it. And I stopped, and I said, that was fantastic. And all of a sudden, the kids are laughing and high-fiving and cheering. And I thought, PC, you dummy, you've been here for almost 6 weeks, and that's the first positive thing you've ever said to the kids. And it was a real epiphany for me. And my point is that if we are introspective enough, we have these epiphanies all the time. And the beauty of our profession, many of my years spent teaching, I taught beginners all the way up through 12th grade. So you really get to know the kids well, and you know how to motivate this child. Or when somebody comes in and you know that Susie's just broken up with her boyfriend, then it's not the day to insist that she's not playing as well as she should be. I mean, we learn all of these things, but the human connection, and here's the thing, you have to not be afraid to be open with your students. And at first, I was barely 2 years older than my seniors when I started teaching. So there's that tendency to want to have, and we can't get too close to our students in a certain way. But I think that we really have to, when we get to know our students and record our rehearsals, I learned so much from listening to what I had to say as much as I did from the sounds that were being produced. I talked way too much, still do.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I know Scott and I are always trying to teach our students too at the collegiate level is say the same thing but with less words. Or better yet, why don't you use sound to teach sound?
Yes.
Why don't you model that on that instrument? And if you're not comfortable on that instrument, why don't you sing it with that beautiful voice that I know you have? Just so that there's a reference, an oral reference, as opposed to a wordy reference.
Right.
I think that's great.
Well, this is why people will see me go to an all-state rehearsal, and I'm taking notes. And they'll say, what are you doing here? You've done, 50 all-state bands in your career. And it's like, I'm still learning. And did you hear what he or she just said? They said that so beautifully in a more succinct way than I'd ever thought of. So, this is how we learn to be better teachers, is by learning from others. How do you say that? How do you present it? What's a new, more imaginative, creative fun but challenging way to present an idea.
Well, and perhaps that's a good segue into one of the questions we had was, in your opinion, what should music educators and supporters of music educators be thinking about right now that we aren't already thinking about?
Well, I always think about, I'm a great fan of quotes. I'm kind of a quoteaholic. And Einstein says that creativity is seeing what everyone else has seen, but thinking what no one else has ever thought. And so as we approach the music, as we approach rehearsals, coming up with ideas, how can I reach the students on a different level? How can I make this music more meaningful? And again, that requires quite a bit of rehearsal preparation. But, it's just playing notes. You might as well be a trained monkey. So I think getting back to, there are 3 levels that we deal with, the technical level. And of course, nobody wants to listen to an ensemble that doesn't play in tune and in time and in tone. But then we get to the intellectual level. And I think sometimes we really underestimate our students, especially today. I can't remember who it was that gave a clinic once at Midwest. No, it was at TMEA. And she was talking about the fact that we underestimate the rhythmic ability of students today. We're teaching 18th century rhythms to 21st century students. It was Joan Tower.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a choral clinic. And so I'm in a choral clinic and all these people from Texas are saying, what are you doing here? You're a band director. And it was like, oh, why not? This is one of the greatest intellect of our time, right? So she was making her point, and at that time, George Bush was president. So she played a George Bush speech, and she said, I want you to take some rhythmic dictation. So we went, dot, da, 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 da. Then she played a rapper. There was no way, because the rhythm was so intricate, and so many things were going on. And, I think that's one of our challenges now, to not underestimate kids. I get tired of people saying, oh, kids today, they're not engaged. Well, their brains are wired differently. We better figure out how with all of the technology. But it doesn't mean they're any less intelligent. As a matter of fact, I think they're far more intelligent.
I think that the level of engagement is perhaps greater and the opportunity is greater because they have had so many more resources with technology and social media to find levels of engagement. So they have more pathways to find this information. Now we just got to know to use those new pathways in their more developed brains. Like I certainly wasn't thinking the way that they were thinking when I was their age. There's no way I would have gotten into Rutgers University where I teach at their age. They're so far advanced and so far beyond. Just the other night, I went to see Ragtime at Lincoln Center.
Oh,
yeah, I know. And it's not a new musical, but it's incredibly timely. If you don't know about it, just, read up and research on it. And I was sitting in front of, it had to have been a high school musical theater troupe. They're all wearing, this sort of high school sweatshirt. And just from the beginning to the end, I could tell just by the reaction to the show, which kids were the lighting kids, which kids were the sound kids, which kids were the pit musicians, which kids were the singers, which kids were the dancers, because their gasps and their reaction to what was happening on stage. But by the end of it, just sobbing, uncontrollable sobbing from those students behind me, which in turn made me, I was already teary-eyed, which made me in turn feel more, which made the entire audience, I think, feel more because they were really standing up and cheering after every song. They were gasping at the lighting design. And I have a friend who plays French horn in the pit, and she texted me afterwards and she said, this was a really good audience. And I let her know why. So when I think about the future of music and music education, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's going downhill and there's so many things wrong and we're so in trouble. There's a part of me that says, wait a second. If those are the students, I have so much hope.
Yes.
They are so with it. They are so into it. They are so inspired. So I guess one of my questions for you is, what do you see for the future for our music classrooms in 10, 20, 50 years? Where do you think it's going?
Well, I looked this up this morning because I always forget the date. But when people say, does music have a future? Going back to those Chauveau cave drawings in France, the oldest known musical instrument is a bone flute that was carbon dated at 60,000 years ago. People were making music.
Wow.
even before many languages were happening. So, I'll see kids in the mall and they're talking to each other with their, instead of having a conversation. And this socialization is a problem which we solve in music because that communication is direct. It's just like you were talking about. They recognize artistry, but they are paying total attention. There's nothing in between you and the music and the baton or whatever. So what we have to offer is needed more now, I think, than ever. And we sell ourselves short if we don't stand up for excellence as well. I'm a little bit concerned about the idea of, just, let them play whatever they want. I heard a group playing a bass guitar and a drum, and it was horrible. And the person teaching the music class wasn't even a certified music educator, but the idea was everyone should be able to make music. I agree, but they should be taught to make meaningful music. They should be taught to accomplish something and have standards. So I'll get off that soapbox. But, what we're doing now, there's no substitute for that.
Paula, so many different things that we can learn about through some of the work we do. I'll tell you a quick story. I've been exploring how I program and what's the repertoire that I put in front of students. And on the concert that I'm going to go to a rehearsal in just a few minutes, we put both whole suites on the same concert. And one of my students looked at me and was like, this isn't your typical programming. And I'm like, okay, what have I been doing wrong? Because Holst is fabulous music. And how Holst scored for band is very different than how Mackey scored or Maslanka scored or how Benjamin Horn scores. And it is doing wonders for their flexibility, for their sound, for how they're able to come together and listen to each other. And to your words, I think we can find greatness in all music if we find ways to bring it out of the kids who are in front of us. So thank you for that gift.
Yes, thank you very, very much. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I just want to say thank you again from us, for our students. I think that you truly take music, which is meaningful for many people for many reasons, but you search to try to find the human connection. It's almost like you're the connective tissue between the black and white on the page and the human heart of it and how their minds can expand from that connectivity. So I really want to thank you for making music an even more meaningful experience to us and our students, and for sharing some of the ways that you do that here with us.
Well, thank you for your kind words. I mean, in the intro, it said I taught for 34 years, but I'm still teaching. So as long as I'm living and breathing, being able to stand in front of a group and make music, regardless of the fact if it's a community band or a group of beginners, when they can light up with the joy of making music, I mean, that's what I live for. That's my drug of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, of course, want to make sure that if you have any final thoughts on where we're at, Scott, you as well. It's just been an honor to watch you in your career. And one of my favorite memories is us doing Tai Chi while we're working on movement. So thank you again.
Tai Chi has really helped my conducting. I do Tai Chi every morning. It's a good meditation, but it's also great for bimanual technique of conducting.
Paula, just a quick note of gratitude for everything that you've done for our profession, for me personally, for everyone. I think so many people have a PC story and you are a gift, and just profound gratitude.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity. I feel like I've been talking and visiting with two kindred spirits, and that's really a privilege. If I might end with something that I usually end with my students, and certainly when I'm doing honor bands, it's a very short poem, and it's, isn't it strange that princes and kings and people who caper in circus rings and common folk like you and me are builders of eternity? Each is given a book of rules and a pair of hands as a set of tools, and each may build, ere his time is flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone. And I think as teachers, especially as musicians, we build stepping stones that kids will remember for the rest of their lives. So thank you all for doing this. Thank you for being such enlightened teachers, and thank you for inspiring me. This has been fun.
Oh, I'm not going to cry, Paula. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. We we, of course, need to take a minute to thank GIA Publications for sponsoring this episode and making this incredible conversation and opportunity possible. And of course, to Music for All for hosting on this podcast. And Paula, just thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do for music education.
Thank you.